Welcome back everyone, it's Charlie. This will be my full X-Men 97 episode 1 video. There are a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references. Does it not feel like it's Saturday morning cartoons all over again? Like they brought it all back. So we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. There'll be 10 episodes total this season. My episode 2 video will post right after this too. There'll be 1 episode per week. They just did a double episode premiere. As you probably noticed during the intro scene, this is just meant to be a continuation of the original X-Men the Animated Series. For production reasons, they just call it X-Men 97 instead of calling it X-Men the Animated Series Season 6. But that's basically what it is. The plot is based on the plot of what they would have done had they done X-Men the Animated Series Season 6. The reason why they're using the 97 in the title is because 1997 is when Season 6 would have originally aired had they done it. Kevin Feige revealed that his only 2 conditions for allowing them to make this, like to actually bring the series back, was that they bring the original cast back. There were a couple actors that passed away they had to recast, but the other big condition that he had was that they get the rights to the X-Men Animated Series theme song, which I've used in a bunch of my videos, but they use remix versions during these new episodes. Marvel's been using it a bunch. They probably secured the rights a while ago because they used it a couple times in the live-action MCU movies to reference mutant-related stuff.
Our final member, Professor Charles Xavier.
Like when they brought Patrick Stewart back as the live-action version based on the one from the animated series, then during the Miss Marvel series when they revealed that she was a mutant too. When we get the brand new live-action X-Men movie inside the MCU, when they start recasting the actors, they'll probably use another remix version of that original animated series theme song. The actual title of episode 1 is To Me, My X-Men. It's a reference to the catchphrase in the comics, originally said by Professor X, but since then a bunch of different characters have spoken it. The interesting thing about it too is that he didn't say that in the original 1960s X-Men comics when they first debuted. He just started saying that catchphrase more recently in the newer comics. The title is also a reference to Cyclops being the team leader when things pick up. He says the catchphrase a couple times, and then Magneto says a twist on it at the end of the series when he takes over the X-Men team.
To me, my X-Men.
Everything he fought for now belongs to me, my X-Men.
In a bit of an inversion on the phrase because he's basically making it seem like things are really bad, like big cliffhanger, but in reality it's sort of the beginning of the redemption of Magneto. Like that's part of the reason why Professor X left him all of his things after he quote-unquote died, even though we know he's still alive. There's a reason for the last will and testament why the government thinks that he's dead. We'll talk about that during the video. They start with a brand new version of the Marvel Studios intro, but it's the Marvel Animation logo for like the new sub-brand they created for all their animated series. So all the animated episodes for any animated series will probably have this in front of it going forward from now. There are a bunch of different Easter eggs in the background. They basically do the same thing with this that they do with the Marvel Studios intro, where they change it based on all the new movies that come along the new TV series. They start with Spider-Man from the original 1960s cartoon, like this is the OG version of Spider-Man. They actually canonized him during Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, like he tried to fight Miles Morales in a really hilarious way.
I can do anything he can. Oh, dang, I pulled something.
This version of the Thing is from the original Fantastic Four cartoon. Like they kind of go through the timeline of the original, like really classic shows into present day animated shows. Then we get a version of Wolverine from X-Men the Animated Series back in the 90s. Next is Silver Surfer from the original Silver Surfer cartoon back in the day. This is the Watcher from the new What If series, like we've moved into present day animated series. This is Zombie Captain America, also from What If. There's actually going to be a Marvel Zombies TV series in the next year. I think it's airing next year based on the versions from What If. And they end with Star-Lord Black Panther from What If Season 1. What they'll probably do as we get new animated series, as they start bringing stuff back and introducing brand new animated series, they'll just change all these scenes in the intro like they did with the traditional Marvel Studios logo. Then they start with the original X-Men the Animated Series intro, but updated with modern character models, like they changed the animation to make it look a little more shiny, more 3D. But all the backgrounds are meant to be the same ones from the original X-Men the Animated Series with a couple minor changes. Like now they have brand new intro scenes that they added for Bishop and Morph, who weren't in the original intro the same way. For Morph's special intro scene here, this is all meant to be references to his Mr. Sinister plot during the original series. They also probably use this Mr. Sinister scene because he's the main villain of Season 1, so they want more Mr. Sinister stuff going on during the intro. And at the end here, when the Brotherhood of Mutants and the X-Men are running at each other, they swap some of the characters, like the rosters are a little bit different. On the Brotherhood of Mutants, there's Juggernaut, Emma Frost, Yuriko, or Lady Deathstrike, whichever you want to call her, Pyro, Mystique, Sabretooth, and I'm not sure who this guy is in the white armor. He looks familiar, though. When the camera moves left, there's Sentinels in the middle. There weren't Sentinels in the original version running after these mutant characters. The people are also different, too. I'm not sure who these characters are. I think they're just meant to be random mutants. In the X-Men roster is meant to be their current main roster right now. They also made this version widescreen. The original version, the intro, was 4x3 letterbox because the original show aired in 4x3. They've been using a lot of Easter eggs to promote the show. When they do the promos, they do them in 4x3 letterbox to reference the way they originally aired those episodes. And if you watch the episodes on Disney+, they're also still 4x3. The way they explained the new animation is that it's meant to be hand-drawn, but they tried to do it as close as possible to the style of the original character models from the original animated series. So it's kind of a blend of 3D and 2D animation. Fun fact too, the original X-Men the Animated Series was animated in Japan by a Japanese studio. That doesn't mean that it's anime, it was just animated in Japan by the same Japanese studio that animated Spider-Man the 90s series, which is also referenced during this episode. Like there's some Easter eggs for that 90s version of Spider-Man and for Venom. For those of you that are new to the series, didn't watch it back in the day, the reason why it starts to look really crappy animation in the later seasons is because they kept cutting the budget. Originally aired on Fox, and Fox cut the budget, so they had to move the show to a cheaper animation studio, which did really janky looking animation. When the series picks up in episode 1, it's meant to be literally like right after the end of the season 5 finale. So like it's fresh off of Professor X leaving the planet and the rest of the world thinks that he's dead, even though we know he's not. That means that the series is still set in the 1990s. So like all the technology, like all the clothing, all the designs, everything is meant to look very 90s style, as opposed to the MCU, which is set in present day in the 2020s. A lot of people wondering about that too. This is set in its own universe, so like this isn't happening inside the MCU. As they start on New York City, they start panning around. You notice there are anti-mutant flyers all over the place because we're still fresh off that storyline at the end of season 5, like whole mutant rights storyline essentially. We'll probably see a version of that kind of play out in the live-action MCU movies in Marvel Phase 7 after Secret Wars, when they start doing a lot of live-action X-Men stuff. It would not be an X-Men story if everybody didn't want them dead because they're different. Notice in the background of the alleyway, you see Callisto and Leech. They're both Morlock characters from the original series. On the TV, the news is talking about Professor X's attempted assassination, even though the news thinks that he's dead, like everyone around the world thinks that he's dead, even the government. This was part of the attack by Henry Gyrich, who they introduced later in the series. He's the person who originally worked for the Department of Defense that funded Trask's building of the Sentinels back during the original episodes. His department was kind of like their universe's version of damage control, the way they're using that inside the MCU. If they do Sentinels in the live-action MCU movies, it'll probably be damage control that tries to create them. Then we see the Friends of Humanity come back. They've captured Roberto da Costa Sunspot from the comics. They say there's someone out there, some mysterious figure that's buying up all the mutants that they can find. My early theory right now is that's going to wind up being Mr. Sinister, who just wants to experiment on them. That's his whole thing. He's meant to be the main villain of Season 1, even though he didn't appear during Episode 1. Sunspot starts teasing his backstory a little, saying he's from a very wealthy family. His father runs Da Costa International. They're extremely wealthy. His father also eventually became a member of the Hellfire Club in the comics. Notice they're using a mutant control collar to suppress his powers, and he's saved by Storm and the other X-Men who show up. They use this scene to sort of show everybody in action, but they kind of slowly roll the team, and so like the entire team doesn't come back until later in the episode. They show the new Sentinel-based weapons they're using. They're just like Sentinel blasters. They look a little bit like basic arm cannons. One of the reasons why they're using Sentinels in this episode is it's meant to reference the beginning of the original X-Men the Animated Series in those first 2 episodes when they introduced the Jubilee character in a similar kind of way. This episode has a lot of references back to the original beginning of the show. Notice that Storm flies in saying her trademark catchphrase, Mistress of the Elements. Some of this is for member berries, like, hey, remember the original animated episodes? Wasn't that cool? But a lot of this episode is also designed to introduce brand new viewers to the characters who didn't watch those original animated episodes. Notice Bishop is fighting with the team. That is a bit of a change. He's not always on the team, but there'll be a lot of time travel, like Cable will be back this season. We get introduced to the new version of Cyclops' voiceover actor. That's because the original voiceover actor died, but for the most part, they try to get as many of the original voice actors that are still alive. This whole joke with them taking his visor off and him pleading with them, but then kind of pulling back on it, is a joke that they pulled during the first couple episodes of the original series too. Then when they leave, they have the newspaper that flies by referencing both Spider-Man asking if he was a mutant too. That's a long conversation. The whole idea is that Spider-Man is a mutate. Like, there's a difference between mutants and mutates. In order to be a mutant, you have to be born with your powers and with the X gene that then later expresses. People with biological powers that only get them later in life are called mutates. So like the Hulk and Spider-Man, for instance, are both mutates. Also notice on the paper, you have Peter Parker and Eddie Brock both writing about the Hellfire Gala. The Hellfire Gala is something that we'll see later this season. It's something from the comics, and it also confirms that we're probably going to see Spider-Man and Venom show up during the season, probably the versions from Spider-Man the 1990s animated series. The producers and the showrunner said that there will be a lot of cameos this season, like a lot of crossover characters, just because they had so many Marvel characters from outside the X-Men show up during the original animated episodes. For instance, Deadpool showed up during the original episodes. Doctor Strange and Clea also appeared during those original episodes too. They basically said that there were no limits on the characters that they could use during this because it's set during the 90s in a completely alternate universe. So like there's no limits on what they can do. Gambit and Rogue return, making some food inside the X-Mansion. Morph returns, walking in pretending to be Professor X. He changes a bunch of times during the episode. A lot of people asking why he looks different than he did during the original animated series. When he was walking around in the original animated series, he was just making himself look human. It'd be kind of like Mystique walking around making herself look human, then changing to her natural state and just looking blue like this. So this is what Morph is meant to look like in his base natural state. A very pregnant-looking Jean Grey returns. It might be Jean Grey, or this could be a version of Madeline Pryor, depending on how close they're going to be to the original comics with this whole storyline. On the show, they want you to think that this is Jean Grey that is pregnant with baby Cable, but in the comics, it was actually Madeline Pryor who gave birth to Cable, and she was meant to be a clone of Jean Grey created by Mr. Sinister as part of this long-running plot. We know that Madeline Pryor is going to show up during the season, but it's not clear which episode she shows up in, but there are a couple moments during this episode that made me wonder if this is really Jean Grey or if it's Madeline Pryor pretending to be Jean Grey and it's part of some Mr. Sinister plot because she keeps talking about them quitting the X-Men. I'm like, is this part of some Mr. Sinister plot? They might just change Cable's origin story for the actual show so that it is actually Jean Grey that gets pregnant with him and gives birth to him. Then they bring Beast back. He's taking care of Sunspot in his lab. Notice he has an Animal Farm book on his shelf, very apropos because of all the mutant rights subplot, what's going on in the government right now. The J. Leewald book is a reference to Julia Leewald, who's one of the writers of the original X-Men the animated series. A lot of people also asking about the Beast post-credit scene, like the X-Men post-credit scene from the Marvels movie. They're probably going to reference that, maybe during Deadpool and Wolverine, but if not in that movie, then it's some movie in the future. Kelsey Grammer's Beast will also probably come back in Secret Wars. I don't know if he's featured in Deadpool and Wolverine, but this is what Beast is going to look like in live action for like the next couple of years at least. This is also the same technology, like the same motion capture technology that they do for the Hulk and that they're going to be doing for the new version of the Thing in the new Fantastic Four movie. Jubilee returns, and they kind of start setting up this friendship between her and Roberto da Costa, like they're going to start going out at some point during the series. She takes Sunspot to play with the Danger Room, sort of reintroduce that. They play a Magneto simulation, also to set up the big twist with him returning at the end of the episode too. Within the context of the X-Men comics, the Danger Room is kind of like a cross between a holodeck from Star Trek, but with some added physical objects. Like in the live-action X-Men movies, they actually added some physical elements to the Danger Room, but in the comics, a lot of it was holographic. They bring Wolverine back, then they show you a picture of the original X-Men roster, the original team from the comics in the 1960s in their original costumes. We'll probably see Iceman and Angel return at some point, but we also saw Morph turn into a version of Angel later in the episode. They bring the Val Cooper character back from the original episode. She's also a comic book character, kind of like a liaison between the US president and mutants inside the government. Within the context of the MCU, that'd be like a Val type of character, but someone who was working for damage control. They set up the subplot with the Sentinels returning, Trask slowly rebuilding them in Master Mold. When she references the storyline about him running off after trying to replace President Kelly's brain, that's from the old episodes. That's an actual plot that they did. They reference what happened to Master Mold, them destroying the factory, but we remember Master Mold survived, and we found out later in the episode that Trask just repaired him. Then even though they show Professor X's death certificate, I think the whole idea here is that he wanted Magneto to take over the team, which is why he created a will, left it to them, and wanted the government to think that he was dead in order to be sort of a martyr for mutant rights. But I do think that they'll bring him back maybe at the end of Season 1 or in Season 2 at some point. Currently, they're also working on Season 3 right now, like they're finishing Season 2 episodes, but they're also going to be making Season 3. So there'll probably be some big cliffhanger at the end of Season 1 and the end of Season 2. Jean Grey starts referencing their time working with that original X-Men team, like when they were originally students at the Academy. Like I said, when she starts asking Cyclops about leaving the team, I don't know if this is some sort of ruse by Mr. Sinister, like some long-term plan, or if it's actually meant to be real Jean Grey who actually does just want to leave the team. But generally, them leaving the team is just meant to help set up Magneto taking over the team. We get a couple X-Men basketball references. Their outfits are all based on their original basketball outfits. Like there were a couple times in the comics back in the 90s when they did play basketball. They tease the rivalry between Wolverine and Cyclops. It's still a thing, everybody remembering all the memes. Later, Morph also teases Wolverine with his love for Jean Grey. Like, you still got the hots for her, but she's pregnant with the other guy's child. Then they kind of give Sunspot this arc where he starts off being really selfish, and Jubilee starts teasing him for being selfish. Like, trust fund baby, you don't care about anybody else but yourself. I think this is all just building up towards him actually becoming part of the team. Then while they're clubbing it up, Cyclops, Bishop, and Storm go to Rikers Island, still in New York City area, to interrogate Guy Ritchie, who's in prison. The whole anti-mutant storyline, like I said, probably going to be the next big arc in the MCU after Secret Wars. When he literally says, "Tolerance is extinction," that's actually the title of the 2-part finale for Season 1. Then he and also other people in the episode keep dumping on Cyclops for being a terrible leader of the X-Men, clearly not as good as Professor X, but also to set up Magneto taking over the team as a much stronger personality, a much stronger leader. Then when Jean Grey uses Cerebro to get into his mind, she winds up seeing visions of a potential future, Cable as a baby, graves of everyone, like humans and mutants, everyone dies, and the potential evolved future final boss form of Master Mold. Some of this is to tease the coming of Cable eventually, like eventually we'll see an older version of Cable show up, and there's a whole Mr. Sinister connection to Cable's origin story. But I also think a lot of this vision is just meant to set up the big battle at the end of the episode. Like some of this will not come to pass because of the way they defeat Master Mold at the end of the episode. But things will still go crazy in the future, like they'll still have some post-apocalyptic future potentially because of what Mr. Sinister is planning. So they figure out the Trask is behind Master Mold returning, they take the X-Jet, notice Morph on the main team again. Then while they're flying out to the desert, the Sentinels attack them, destroying the X-Jet. I'm sure they'll fix it eventually. Also, Roberto da Costa at the end of the episode is like, you know what, I got a jet too. Notice the cool way that they save the day here too, like the jet blows up, everybody's in midair, so all the X-Men that can fly or can morph into people who can fly, like Morph changes into a version of Angel. But you have Rogue, you have Storm, they can fly naturally, so they save everyone, but they do a cool thing with Cyclops' powers. This is actually a cool use of his abilities. He uses his eye blast to slow his descent, and I can't remember if they've actually done this in the comics or not. But he gets his very own version of a hardcore superhero landing, Deadpool would be proud, and he says the catchphrase, "To me, my X-Men." And they played the X-Men theme song again. They play it a lot during this episode. We find out that Trask has repaired Master Mold and repaired some of the Sentinels. They look super janky, like he didn't build new Sentinels, he just repaired a bunch of the old ones that had been junked. They have a big action scene to show the team working together with all their powers. It's super cool. I love this scene. And they played the full version of the X-Men theme song. When they say Omega level threat detected, that's because Storm is an Omega level mutant in the comics, one of the most powerful ones on the planet. Now in the comics, the list of who gets to be an Omega level mutant always changes at any given time. Generally, you're not meant to have that many on planet Earth at any one given time. And for example, Scarlet Witch is more powerful than Storm. So even amongst Omega-level mutants, there's a tier list, like Professor X, for example, is an Omega-level mutant. We get to see Morph changing into the Blob again to do a version of the Fastball Special, like a bit of a twist on the Fastball Special where he takes out Master Mold. And Val Cooper returns with the government forces to clean up the Sentinels in Master Mold, kind of like what Damage Control would do in the MCU. I know I made Val MCU references. Jubilee invites Sunspot to stick around and then reminds him about her origin story with the X-Men team during the first 2 episodes of the original series, like almost the exact same thing happened to her that happened to him. When he references the X-Men being a family that will accept you, and that's nice, it's because his father is not a mutant and hates mutants. And it sounds like he's implying that he hasn't told his father or his parents that he's a mutant just because he's worried about what they'll think of him. He shows off a little bit of his powers. They're meant to be just like they look in the comics, solar-based energy powers. This is what he looks like with them all activated. Then they get ready to play a larger version of the basketball game, just a reference to all those 90s basketball games that they played in the comics. When they're interrupted by Magneto, who breaks back into the X-Mansion and shows them the last will and testament of Professor X, naming him his sole heir. So all of his wealth, everything he owns, the X-Men, everything belongs to Magneto now. And they end on the cliffhanger where he says the same line, but in a darker way, "To me, my X-Men." Like I said, this is a bit of a setup because the whole idea is that Professor X wants this to be the redemption of Magneto, like they're longtime friends who just disagreed with each other over their methods. It doesn't mean that Professor X hated Magneto or anything like that. And they're basically showing that Magneto is going to become a much more hardcore, darker leader for the X-Men. Like the team itself will become a little more hardcore under his leadership. During the end credits, they have that cool looking character selection screen that looks kind of like a video game, but that's actually how they did the original outros in the early X-Men episodes, so it's basically just designed to look just like the original episodes. They also had a version of this inside their X-Men computers in the original series too, basically just showing you what all their different powers are. All these consulting producers that they list off here too were people who made the original series. That's why Avia Rod's name is here. He's a consulting producer because he was one of the producers of the original series. During the end credits, they also play a remix version of the X-Men theme song too, like a slightly different version. There's a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references during episode 1, so if you spotted any during the episode that I didn't talk about during the video, just write down below in the comments. In my episode 2 video we'll post next, I'll try to get that up in the next couple of hours. Big reminder after this though, every week will just be one episode per week. It was only a double episode premiere. In talking more about live action X-Men stuff in the MCU, we're supposed to get a new Deadpool and Wolverine trailer pretty soon. Everybody click here for that X-Men 97 episode 2 video. I'll update the link as soon as I post it, and click here for all my Deadpool and Wolverine videos. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.